Okay, and here we go. In 3, 2, 1, you're live.
Hello, 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 Santa Barbara. It's your Chantress of everything.
I'm sorry,
valuable.
Elizabeth. I getting used to doing this backwards is interesting. One more time. One more time. In 3, 2, 1, you're live.
Hello, Santa Barbara. It's your Chantress of everything valuable and beautiful, Elizabeth Stewart. We're celebrating the Ojai Film Festival this week. Got a few wonderful filmmakers with us, and we have the director of the film festival with us. And I want to just introduce a couple of people. John Lambert is here, who's the director, and he said to me, "This is our yearly chat." We talked about the film festival right about this time last year, and I want to see what the ravages of the pandemic have done to the festival and what the preparations are for this year. And we're going to ask John. And Sky Bergman is here, who I'm just thrilled to see again. Sky did a film that I actually went to the premiere. It was called Lives Well Lived. And then I tracked the progress of that film, and it went all over the country, not only that, all over the world. And it featured some wonderful people of a certain age, quote, around certain age, who had lived a beautiful life. One of them was my friend Santi Fazali, who Sky included in the films beautifully. And Sky's done another film for the festival that we're going to talk about. And John Ziles is here. And John is, am I pronouncing, is it Ziles or is it Zills?
Zillis.
Zillis. John Zillis is here, and he has made a film about a reporter. And actually, Richard, you might remember Ivor Davis was on our show. He published his book, and Ivor was on our show. And Ivor is a really interesting guy. It's interesting to read about how John discovered Ivor, because he's saying, well, you know, Ivor is a combination of Zelig and Forrest Gump. And there's Ivor. Ivor just joined us. Hey, Ivor. Sorry. We were just bragging on you. Okay.
Apologies for coming on late.
That's okay. We were just introducing us to your perfect timing.
And there's the famous John Zillis. Oh my God.
There he is.
I tell you, I can't, sorry to interrupt. I'm so excited to be on the program with John Lambert. Oh my God. And John Zillis. Oh my God. And everybody else. Sorry. Okay, I'll shut up and listen.
No, that's okay. So no, I want you to talk. That's why you're on the radio, Ivor. So okay. John discovered Ivor because he discovers interesting people, and that's his gift. And so that's just how this happened. In the film about Ivor, we're going to talk a little bit about and how that came to be and why that's going to be so interesting. And we already know, because we're hearing Ivor speak to us right now about we're going to talk about his run-ins with some of the interesting people, not to mention which the Beatles, for example. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But John, I wonder if you could start us off. Introduce to us the film festival for this year. How many films, how you created it? Is it, has COVID influenced your choices? Obviously influenced, you know, the kind of crowds that you're going to have. Tell me a little bit about the festival this year.
Yeah, this year the festival has become a hybrid. Last year, in the midst of the COVID shutdown for all things cultural, we were on a very fast learning track and put together a completely virtual festival. So we did have a film festival in 2020, but everything was done online. We could not, of course, have any venues within Ojai. This year, since things have loosened up significantly, we have decided to do a hybrid. We are having a 4-day festival, all located here in Ojai in the Ojai Arts Center. But we are insisting that any person who comes to our festival, be they presenter, patron, or whatever, must show us a current ID and a proof of vaccination. And of course, County of Ventura mandates that a mask be worn inside of any venue. So we're doing that. after which all of the festival films will be offered on an on-demand basis online. So it's a hybrid. And that's how we've dealt with it. We're very comfortable. Whether people come or not remains to be seen.
Yeah. So about how many films do you have in the festival this year?
There's a total of 79 films.
Wow.
80 if we include one that Chloe Zhao is bringing with her when she comes. This is chosen out of about almost 320 films we received. So we're looking at about 16 or 17% of all the films that we've received will be in this festival. They range from short animations to full-length features. It's a delight.
So just dear listener, I want to introduce John Lambert a little more fully. He's a fascinating individual. He's Dr. Lambert, actually. And Dr. Lambert actually moved to Ojai in 2000. And you moved, I think, did you move from the East Coast? I can't remember, John.
Yes,
Yeah.
we moved from Westchester County, which is just north of New York City.
So you moved from the East Coast to Ojai. That's quite a change. And the minute he landed in Ojai, he started to become very interested in the cultural life of Ojai. He's the president of the Ojai Valley Library Friends and Foundation, and he's vice president of the Tibetan Aid Foundation. Traveled in Europe and Scandinavia, China, Morocco, Tanzania, etc. And then it's funny because his bio says his basic philosophy can be summed up as the following: enjoy life, be useful, and do one's best not to harm people and other things. So so pulling this together this year, John, were there any significant challenges? I mean, obviously COVID, but.
Well, the COVID, of course, is an overreaching challenge for everybody. Our biggest challenge lies in the fact that our film festival, since its inception in the year 2000, has relied almost entirely on volunteers. From the board of directors right down through the person who ushers you into a seat or does a question and answer. These are all volunteers. We have one paid person who does social media and advertising for us. So the question of getting volunteers for this, how should I put it, COVID-infested festival is a challenge, because many of the volunteers are in the older age groups, the more senior, and have a very real fear of getting sick. This is one reason why we have the requirements for the COVID vaccinations. But we have just received a spate of volunteers, so it looks like everything is going to work out well. But that, I think, has been the biggest challenge.
Getting your volunteer base. Yeah.
Yes. One of the joys of the festival for filmmakers is that those who choose to come to Ojai have been put up with host families around the valley. That also has been a challenge as a result of COVID, but it's happening.
Well, I think that's remarkable. I think that's a testimony, you know, the resourcefulness of the folks up in Ojai.
Yeah, it's very Ojai.
Yeah, it is very Ojai. Richard, you're giving us a sign we have to go to quick break. Okay, so when we get back from the break, I want to talk with John Zillis and Ivor Davis. And my question for John, and I want him to ask his subject, that's Ivor, if, or Ivor can ask John. What I'm interested to know is there's something that wasn't included in the film on Ivor that perhaps you wish would be included or you couldn't include, and why. So maybe think about that when we get back from the break. We'll hear from you, John Zillis and Ivor Davis, about that. And tell me a little bit about the film and some of the interesting things that occurred. It could not fail to be interesting with the subject like Ivor, I know. So let's go to quick break. When we get back, we'll have an answer to that question. Don't turn that down. Back in a minute. I'm here with John Lambert, Ivor Davies, John Zillis, Sky Bergman, and we're talking about the Ojai Film Festival. Don't turn that down.
Thanks.
We're clear and ready for the next one. Whoops. We're all set in 3, 2, 1. You're live.
Welcome back. It's Elizabeth Stewart, and we're celebrating the Ojai Film Festival this year. And I'm talking with two filmmakers, Sky Bergman and John Zillies. And John Lambert is the director of the festival, and he's here as well. And my question before the break was, we're talking to John about a film he made about Ivor and Ivor's career. And the question was, is there something that John wishes that he would have included and why? And is there something that Ivor wishes that John would have included and why? So let's see, let's go to Ivor first.
Well, that's a tough question, because I must tell you that when John first approached me to do this movie, I mean, I did not have a clue as to what he was going to do, but I will say this, and it doesn't answer your question. I apologize for going in a slightly different direction. But John has actually come up with a bit of a miracle film, because what he's done is the film lasts about 9 to 10 minutes with credits. And what he's done is he's packed every 10 years of my life into 1 minute. Right? So that's an achievement, isn't it, John? I mean,
well,
come on, anybody, any of us on this discussion. I mean, John Lambert, could you pack 10 years of your life into 1 minute? Not really. So I must say that John Zillies is a bit of a miracle worker. Again, that doesn't answer your question. There's so much. I think if John had made a 45-minute documentary, after 10 minutes, people would have fallen asleep to learn more about me. But anyway, I'm going to throw the question back to John. John, what did you leave out?
Well, this is, I've spent my whole life working in 30-second increments. I make mostly TV commercials. So this is really a super long film from my perspective. But I mean, Ivor has had such an interesting life that there are so many stories that could have been included. So I just had to cherry pick, you know, the ones to me that I thought would capture an audience's attention. And so that's what I did. But yeah, there could be a feature-length film on all that Ivor has seen and done in his days.
Well,
But I have no regrets.
One thing. There are some fun stories that we didn't touch upon. So people are going to get a little bit of a picture of me. And I hope one of the fun things of the Ojai Film Festival, and why John and I, when we talked about it, and John said, I mean, slight exaggeration, John said, let's go on for another 3 hours and you can talk. I said, John Lambert, don't overdo it. You know, let's keep it down to a reasonable amount, because I do have some great stories. And in the format that John Zillies did, we couldn't get them all in, but we will have some fun on that night at the Ojai Film Festival, because believe me, John is going to talk about his career. I'm going to tell some funny stories about what happened to me in the last few decades. And as I said, we will have a good time. And I hope anybody that comes along to see the film will just get a kind of a, John, I'm not being offensive if I say that it's a snapshot into my life.
I'd say that's quite accurate.
Thank you.
So just a little bit about Ivor. Ivor's been on our program before when he actually published the book, The Beatles and Me on Tour. But Ivor's career goes back into some really interesting historical moments. He was a foreign correspondent for the London Daily Express and the Times of London. He wrote a weekly column for the New York Times Syndicate. He traveled with the Beatles when they invaded America in 1964. He became the only newspaper reporter to witness the meeting between Elvis and the Beatles. He covered the Watts riot and was shot at. He was at the University of Mississippi campus after James Meredith became the first Black student to enroll. When Sirhan assassinated Robert Kennedy, he was in the kitchen of the Ambassador Hotel. He was one of the boys on the bus when when Ronald Reagan won the White House. And then some of the books that he's written, in addition to his journalism career, he wrote the first ever book on the Manson murders, Five to Die. And Manson exposed a reporter's 50-year journey into madness and murder. And that was released on the 50th anniversary of the Tate LaBianca murders. And then, of course, we covered his publishing of his award-winning book, The Beatles and Me on Tour. And that was written on the anniversary, the 50th anniversary of the 1964 summer tour of the Beatles. And so, John, I know that you were saying that, you know, you come from a tradition of very short visuals, such as commercials, but how did you pick the events that you wanted to cover?
Well, I always like to start a film with, you know, we call it a cold open, you know, an arresting, something that's going to get you to pay attention, that's going to ask a question. So siphoning through all the interviews that I had done with Ivor, I just thought that the Kennedy, you know, I don't want to give away the whole film, but we open up with talking about the Kennedy thing, because I think that gets your attention. And then, you know, it's just, again, it's just, you know, you're always asking an audience to stay with you through a journey, whether it's 30 seconds or 2 hours. So it's just choosing the things that I think, you know, cause a curiosity in the viewer's mind and will keep you from clicking to the next channel or, you know, the next link or whatever that would be.
Right.
So that was the approach.
So the film premieres November 7th at 7 p.m. And the title of the film is I Was There, A Reporter's Story. And like we said, it chronicles Ivor Davies' life. Ivor was saying that he owes kudos to John because every year of his life is 1 minute or something like that. But the issue is that is interesting guy in an interesting film. And I was interested to see that John's, you know, his background is that he is a cinematographer, but he recently started to make his own films. I Was There, this film we're talking about is his third film. So my question, John, the first two films, what were they about?
The first of all, I've made short documentaries. The first film was about another local Venturan, an artist named M.B. Hanrahan, who some of you might be familiar with. She's a muralist in the area. And then the second one was about a woman whose name is Mendy Fry, who's a drag racer, not drag queen, drag racer, high, you know, 1,000 miles an hour or whatever those cars go. So, you know, I'm just always on the lookout for people who are interesting and captivating and might have an interesting story. So that's how I stumble across these people.
And it sounds like you like biographies, that you like, you know, personal histories.
Yeah.
By the three. Yeah.
I'm just, you know, I love interviewing people and talking to people and seeing what comes from that.
So I think I would like to go to quick break, Richard, if possible. And I want to talk with Sky, and, you know, this is going to be something I'm going to ask John Lambert's help with, because Sky's film is about the tradition of the Japanese New Year. And I know that John has traveled into Asia. And so I haven't. I'm going to give a little background of Sky's film. And then I wonder if John has some specific questions for Sky about the film because of his Asia travels and his Asian experience. So maybe think about that, John, when we go to quick break and we get back. We're going to talk a little bit about the film, Sky's film, and about Sky's background. And I'm going to brag on Lives Well Lived one more time, because that really was a remarkable film. I can remember sitting in the theater. It was a packed theater and everybody was crying at the premiere. So Rich, let's go to quick break and just reintroducing. I'm talking about the Ojai Film Festival with the festival director, John Lambert. And we've got two filmmakers here, John Ziles and Sky Bergman. And we've got the subject of John's film with us today, Ivor Davies, very famous journalist and author, full of rich history. So we've got an interesting time ahead. Don't turn that down. I'll be back in a minute.
Okay, you're clear, and we'll start the next segment here in just a second. All right, in 3, 2, 1, you're live.
Welcome back. It's Elizabeth Stewart. I'm talking about the Ojai Film Festival, and we're talking with John Lambert, who's this festival director. Want to talk with Sky Bergman. And Sky is the former chair of art and design at Cal Poly State University in San Luis Obispo. She's professor of photography and video. She's been teaching that since 1995. She's an award-winning photographer. And then I had the good fortune of interviewing her when her book came out, The Naked and the Nude, Images from the Sculpture Series. And I have that in my library. It's beautiful. And this was introduced by the director and curator of photography at the Rodin Museum in Paris. She's also shot book covers for Random House, Farrar, Strauss and Giroux. She's done magazine spreads in the Smithsonian, Arthur Frommer's Budget Travel, Reader's Digest, Archaeological Odyssey. Her work is in the permanent collection at LACMA, the Brooklyn Museum, the Seattle Art Museum, and the Santa Barbara Museum of Art, not to mention the Bibliothèque Nationale of France. And she's decided to do bring a film to the Ojai Film Festival about the ancient tradition of preparing mochi, I hope I'm saying that right, to celebrate the Japanese New Year. And the film is portraying the engagement of the practitioners in the ceremonial pounding of cooked rice and the forming of warm mochi cakes. And it's about what the intergenerational communication around this preparation and what the festival means to them and what the preparation means to them, what the New Year means to them. And Sky, will you pronounce the title of the film?
Sure, it's Mochisuki.
Mochisuki. So, John, I want to throw this to you. You've traveled widely in Asia. I can only imagine that you have a greater insight than I do about the ceremonial and the ritual traditions. So ask Sky a couple of questions for me.
Well, widely would be pushing it. I've been around China twice and Hong Kong, but one of the things I came to recognize as I was able to visit various parts of China were the traditions around dumplings. Dumplings are pervasive throughout Asia. In almost any country, you find something similar to a dumpling, but they have different meanings within all the cultures and the subcultures. I have yet to get to Japan. It happens to be pretty high on the bucket list. So I can't ask anything particularly about it, but I did note that there's some very special cultural meanings involved with the entire ritual of making that. And I find, to me, that's absolutely fabulous and lends itself to an understanding of the people. So perhaps you could just explain more about that for me, if no one else.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. And I just want to go back a minute and mention something about Lives Well Lived, which is now airing on PBS. So it's gone on quite a journey, and now it's on PBS, and
Nice.
which is wonderful. And we've been doing intergenerational projects using the film as a catalyst, because in that film, I interviewed 40 people, 75 and older, with a collective life experience of 3,000 years. And in some ways I took for granted that the film is based on my relationship with my grandmother as a starting point. And I kind of loved that, that idea of connecting generations and using the film as a catalyst. So we're doing intergenerational projects with colleges and high schools all across the country now, and using the film as the springboard for that. And actually Mochisuki came out of the Lives Well Lived film, because one of the people in the film, her name is Susie Edo Bauman, and she is Japanese American. And in the film, the Lives Well Lived film, she actually tells the story of being interned during World War II and what that meant to her. And that firsthand account was so visceral to me and really framed it in a very different way. But I become very close to all the people in the film. I feel like I have 40 new grandparents, she being one of them. And her family gets together every year, the week between Christmas and New Year's, to do this mochisuki ceremony, which is not the mochi that you get at Trader Joe's. It's much better than that. They cook the rice and then they pound it and they form these mochi balls. But more than that, it very much reminded me of kind of how I started the Lives Well Lived film, which was being in the kitchen with my grandmother and the passing down of tradition through food, and that passing down of information from one generation to the next while you're cooking and while you're there together. And I think one of the beauties of the mochisuki ceremony is that you have generations. There are about 150 people that were at the ceremony that I filmed it 2 different years, and the different generations, 3, 4 different generations in these families that come together on that day from all up and down the coast of California all the way up to Washington. And that beauty of passing down that cultural and the cultural traditions from one generation to the next. I think that's something that will be forever tied to my work, is having an intergenerational connection in every piece that I do. And I should also say that I always feel like the more personal the message, the more universal it becomes. And my brother is married to a Japanese woman and they have 2 kids. And on the same day that I was filming the mochisuki ceremony, they were also doing that in Japan together as a family. So with their grandparents. And so I do feel like there's also this very personal connection to the film as well.
Well, one of the questions I was going to ask Guy was, did you go to Japan to film this? And
no, this was not, this was in Los Osos, California. There are about 5 families all up and down the coast that still perform this ceremony, which is really wonderful, because I think it's, you know, one of the things that I'm thinking of for my next feature film is looking at what are those traditions that are passed down from one generation to the next through food, because we all love food. Everybody loves those traditions. And that's really, I think, where the fun is and where those stories come out. And so this was in the US. Then there's lots of traditions. I mean, John mentioned dumplings in China, and I know there's a tradition of doing that in this country as well. Their tradition of tamale making during that same time period, you know, so there's a lot of these traditions that I think it would be wonderful to capture those and put those into a feature film.
You know, Sky, I was thinking about, when I was reading about the film, I was thinking about, believe it or not, my storage locker. So I have this big box in my storage locker. My grandparents and my parents they're from Germany. And my grandparents came over with all the traditions of food. And my grandmother brought these old pots, a collection of old pots, and she traveled from Germany with these pots. And I can remember my mother saying, you know, I really don't want to cook with those. They're not the Revere ware. They're not the modern ones, et cetera. I said, I'll take them. And I threw them in the storage locker. And of course, they probably wouldn't come up to code right now, but they're not going to kill anybody, but still. And then the other thing around the food connection that you mentioned is my grandfather had a specific knife that he brought from Germany, and it had to be next to his breadboard in the morning so he could cut the bread with this knife. And he used that knife for 60 years. My mother has it now. So these objects around food as well, you know, tell this marvelous story. And by the way, those pots and pans went to my son, who's, you know, married now 4 years. And you know, hopefully they'll go to his kids. So, you know, there's this whole tradition of the objects associated with food and all the memories, you know, I can remember my grandmother's big crock pot that she did her kraut in, you know, the pickling, big, you know, great big ceramic things that she kept in the basement, you know, the kind of basement door that opens like this from the ground, you know, that triangular door in the cellar. I can remember that as well. I mean, all that. And I know Lives Well Lived, you start by being in the kitchen with your grandmother in that film.
Absolutely. I mean, that was really how the film got started, was with us cooking in the kitchen together.
And I want to know, when we get back from the break, do you think that the fact that these families are in the States influenced their idea or intensifies their idea of tradition of the ceremony, the mochisuki ceremony, of the fact that they are not on their, you know, in Japan? Does that make it more poignant, did you feel, in making that film? When we get back from the break, I'd like for you to answer that question. Hey, Richard,
Yes.
let's go to quick break. I'm here with the director of the Ojai Film Festival, John Lambert. John Zillies is here, filmmaker, and Sky Bergman, a marvelous filmmaker who actually I've covered before a number of times. We're covering her new film for the film festival, Mochisuki, which is also a generational film around a topic that I think is fascinating, the preparation of food together as a communal ritual. Ivor Davies is here, and Ivor we've covered before, who's a great author, great journalist, and he is the feature of John's film, which is called I Was There, A Reporter's Story. Couldn't go wrong with that. But when we get back from the break, I want Sky to answer, does the fact that these, the people that are celebrating the tradition of Mochisuki, the fact that they're in Los Osos, does that matter? And how is that portrayed in the film is what I want to know. Hey, Richard, let's go to quick break.
All right, you're clear. Stand by. Get this lined up, and here we go. In 3, 2, 1, you're live.
Welcome back. It's Elizabeth Stewart, and I'm speaking with John Lambert, the director of the Ojai Film Festival. Filmmaker John Zillies, his subject, Ivor Davies, is here. Sky Bergman is here, and we're talking about her film for the film festival, Mochisuki. And my question was, does the fact that these celebrants are celebrating in Los Osos and not Japan, the making of the rice balls called mochi, does that make a difference? And how did you portray that, Sky?
I don't think that it really makes a difference. I think that they, you know, when I spoke to the people that are part of it, they want to keep this tradition alive. And they talked about, even when they were in the internment camps, doing the Mochisuki ceremony. So it's something that's very important to them. And they hope that the younger generation will pick up on that and continue that tradition. So I think it's a really important ritual because it helps bring the family together. That might be the one time all year that the family all get together from all different parts of the West Coast. And that's a really important moment for everyone.
And so in Lives Well Lived, there's a philosophical underpinning of the importance of actually listening to various generational wisdom. How do you do that as well in this film?
Well, I think that, the granddaughter of one of the people that's kind of running the whole show talks about what it means to her to be doing this with her grandfather, and you can see in the film how wonderful their connection is. And I think that that's really important. The more that we show that, the more that we break down those barriers of ageism and stereotypes about aging, I think the better off that we all are, so that we really start understanding each other as people rather than as segmented, generations.
Yeah. And the other thing you bring up is that was also on my list of questions to ask you, which is, traditionally we think of cooking between the women of the family, teaching the kids, the granddaughters. And so when you said that you've got a grandfather and a granddaughter.
Yes, so the grandfather there's a beautiful tradition where they have to pound the rice. They have these beautiful wooden mallets and they pound the rice, and he's kind of calling out the numbers to pound, and they get the kids involved. They want everybody really involved. And I think that that's the beauty of it, is that everybody's involved, and then everybody brings food and they do a big potluck at the end of it. So it's a really beautiful celebration. It's a whole day worth of celebrating from very early in the morning to very late in the evening. It's really wonderful.
And then when do they actually have the feast?
They do that the same day. So they're eating them, they take them home. Each family has their own rice that they make, and they have it all labeled, and it's a communal event, but then each family gets to take a certain amount of the mochi balls home.
Did you get to take any home?
They did give me some. I have to be honest that I don't particularly like the consistency of mochi, and that's okay. In the film, one of the women in the film, Jean is her name, Jean Kikuchi, she says that she gave a mochi ball to a friend of hers who tried to eat the whole thing, and she almost, you can't, you have to take it in small bites because it has a very unique and distinct consistency. So I love the ceremony far more than I love the actual food itself. But the other food that is brought for the potluck is amazing. So it counteracts for that.
Well, that's the thing. It's funny because the pots I was talking about that my grandmother brought over from Germany, and that went to my mom, went to me, and went to my son now. They require an amazing amount of butter and oil to actually make them cook. And I mean, you'd be 300, 400 pounds if you use those every day with all that. Yeah, it's a different, yeah. So I know what you mean. You may love the tradition, but the food itself, maybe, maybe. So I want to talk with Ivor next. And what I'm interested to know from Ivor is his reaction to seeing himself in a film like this. I want to know what Ivor thought, what you thought when you saw yourself portrayed. Yeah. So when we get back from the break, hey, Richard.
Yes.
Let's go to a quick break. And I want Ivor's reaction to seeing himself, larger, 20 times larger than life on the screen. I want to know what he felt about that when we get back from the break. Don't turn that dial, back in a minute.
All right, very good. And this will give you, whoa, what is that?
There's a wonderful, the art of film lends itself to this kind of cultural stuff. There is a film whose name escapes me, but it looks at Mexicans who are cooking in restaurants of Thai, of Chinese, and how it's influencing Mexican cooking as I bring it home. I can't remember the name of it.
Oh, if you think of it, I'd love to know about that. That sounds right up my alley.
Yeah.
Thanks, John.
Yeah. Saw it about 5 years ago, maybe.
Anything to do with food's wonderful.
We have actually, Sky, just a thought, I've often wondered if other families do this and what the story is behind the family cookbook. Because, I'm an appraiser, and I find in people's notes, when the kids say, I don't want this stuff, I go through and try to categorize it for the final estate tally, usually, that the attorneys order me to do. And I always, not always, but generally find a family cookbook, whether it be on 3x5 cards or some cousins put it together on a mimeograph machine in the old days. There's usually a family cookbook, and the story behind that, and all the people that had to be roped into the production of such a cookbook, that intrigues me as well, all that. Okay, Richard, we're ready for you.
Okay, stand by in 3, 2, 1. You have 8 minutes. 8 minutes. 3, 2, 1. You're live.
Welcome back. It's Elizabeth Stewart. I'm speaking with John Lambert, the director of the Ojai Film Festival this year. Well, last year too. And we spoke to him last year about the festival. We're actually interviewing Sky Bergman, wonderful filmmaker. You may have seen, and I just am so glad to hear PBS picked up Lives Well Lived, and Sky's been doing, I'm going to say seminars, teaching sessions, relational sessions, intergenerational relational sessions, triggered by Lives Well Lived across the country and across the world. Her book, Naked and Nude, is on my bookshelf. She's in all kinds of museums as a professional award-winning photographer and photojournalist and art photographer, also a filmmaker. Her film is called Mochitsuki, and it's about the pounding of rice balls at the Japanese New Year. And I want to talk a little bit with John Zillies, because he has covered a notorious, wonderful personage around Santa Barbara and Ojai and Southern California in general, Ivor Davies. Ivor is the author of many books, one on Charles Manson's murder, two actually, and then the book that Richard and I covered when it was released, The Beatles and Me on Tour, that actually won all kinds of awards itself. So my question for Ivor is, so John makes a film about you. What was your experience in seeing yourself?
I want to toss in, before I answer that question,
Okay.
I am very impressed with the incredible job that John Lambert and his people have done, his board have done, to bring such a wonderful, eclectic bunch of films to the Ojai Film Festival. So congratulations, John, and your group. So that's one thing I wanted to do. The second thing is, I would like Sky to take John Zillis and I, and maybe John Lambert as well, out for the best local restaurant for mochi balls, because I've never tried mochi balls. So put that down, Sky. Please take a note of that. And I forgot what the question was now.
Ivor, Sky's got some in her freezer. She didn't like them.
Well, then that's good. All right. Well, I can either come over if you're local, and if you're not local, then you can overnight them to me. Thanks.
I'll bring some down.
Okay, good. So, and again, Elizabeth, thanks for having me on again. And I think you said, the question. I'll shut up in a minute, but I'll answer the question. You know, in a way, it was joyful watching the film, and it was sad because my late wife was in the film. So I get a bit emotional on that. But he has captured it. And now, soon after this program, John is going to take me out for a coffee, and we're going to talk about doing a 17-hour series on my life for Netflix.
Really?
Okay, that's it. Well, slight exaggeration, but I'm prone to slight exaggeration, as John Lambert knows. Anyway, I've talked too much. Talk to somebody else, please.
Now, did you actually believe that was your life, though?
No, in a way, yes and no, but the problem is I saw this guy jumping in the swimming pool, and I thought, who is that old geezer? And then I realized it was me. I said, thank you, John, for showing me as a very old geezer, which whenever I see John Lambert, he says to me, you are an old geezer, and then we talk about that. But seriously, it's funny to see yourself on the screen, because this has never happened to me before, and probably will never happen to me again. But anyway, it was an eye-opener. It was a revelation. It was kind of weird. Sorry about that, John Zillis.
So you were saying you appear to be an old geezer, but obviously, John, you've included a lot of footage of his younger years, right? His
young geezer years, yes.
Oh, he's always been a geezer.
Actually, there's some great quotes that I did not use in the film. Ivor, I can't remember what you called yourself. You were discussing a trip to the Falaise Bruges or whatever, and I think you didn't call yourself an old bastard, but you gave yourself a little. Anyway, I didn't use that line. I'll keep that in my back pocket for blackmail if I ever need it.
Thank you. Good to know.
Just make sure you pay your bill every month. Remember.
Yeah, exactly. Otherwise, the boys are coming. The boys are coming. Richard, we have 2 more minutes, or we have to go to break? 2 more minutes. Okay. Well, I'm interested to know, John, once you've covered Ivor Davies, who else are you going to cover? I mean, basically, you've done it.
My eyes are always open. I'm working on another one now about a gentleman that I met who is a local also. He lives over the 33 out towards Taft, and his name is Carl Sonny Leyland. And he is one of the world's greatest boogie woogie piano players. He travels the world playing jazz festivals, and he is Also a Brit, so it's fun to talk to him because he sounds funny, like Iva. And I really like music films, music documentaries. So I'm trying to make another short documentary about a musician. That's what's next.
And Sky, what about you? What's on the table for you next?
Well, I think doing more of the intergenerational work and doing more films around food, doing a feature film around food and that intergenerational connection and how different cultures bring their traditions to this country.
You know, I just want to let you know, Sky, that food was such an important thing. And the reason I asked that, the question about, you know, celebrating a Japanese festival in the States is my grandfather on Thanksgiving insisted, he loved Thanksgiving. He was German, but he loved Thanksgiving. And he insisted that if we're going to have turkey, we're going to have red cabbage with the turkey. So we had for Thanksgiving, turkey and red cabbage. That was our nod to German American intergenerational thoughts. Thank you, John Lambert, John Zillies, Ivor Davis, Sky Bergman. Good luck with the festival. It should be fantastic. John, and thank you for all the work you've done on this. Apparently, it's been a real challenge in the COVID times, but I know it'll be a huge success. And thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Elizabeth.
you.